Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 89 for Monday, August the 10th. My name is Farbod Merkazi, here as always with Jace Hatfield. And we kind of lied to you last week. We said this week would be the Picks podcast. After the pod last week, we kind of talked a little bit more. We pushed the Picks podcast back a week. We're not ignoring it, but we have a lot. We have some runway before we get into the college football season. We're going to talk kind of like last week was a combination of a lot of different topics. We have a lot of 2026 college football storylines to get into, what the media is saying about teams or players, what next year's NFL draft might look like, why are people down on Indiana, all that and everything in between. The Big 12 being the hodgepodge of a conference that it always is, and we love for that. So as we're getting into all of this, I'm just constantly reminded that college football is coming back, and it's just like, I think every week the butterflies, the jitters, the excitement's building up.
Yeah, it's like each workday gets a little bit longer. And it's also the time of the year you start getting like fantasy football conversations on social media and with friends. So that also kind of raises the bar a little bit. This will be a great episode, though. If you are somebody who wants to get more into college football, or you are interested, but you don't necessarily have the time to learn all about it or learn about all the storylines and what's the big things to look out for in 2026, this will be like a perfect episode to get you caught up. Like, okay, season's coming around the corner. Who's good? What are people saying? Which coaches are under the hot seat? Like all of those conversations that you might not want to take the time to research yourself. We're going to dump that to you here. So lock in, send this to your friends who want to get more into college football. Send this to your friends who don't have the time to do the research. Hopefully we can lay out a good landscape of what the year is going to look like for you in this one.
I mean, that's what this podcast's for, right? Like, we're not like the smartest people in the room. We love the sport. So for the people who are diehards and geeks like us and who are pay attention to everything in the off season, great. This is more, we love your takes on things. But if you checked out after Indiana won the national title last year, or after your team's the last game of the season ended last year, that's completely fine too. We're here for that. We'll catch you up. We'll get you up to speed. Whether you started listening on day one of this show to 10 minutes ago, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you are subscribed to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, at Flagged for Discussion spelled out. We're on TikTok at Flagged, the number 4 discussion, and Twitter at F, the number 4 discussion. So as I said, we have a lot of storylines to get into. First, we have a game. Jace, since it was your game, I want you to introduce it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a game. We're calling it the storyline stock market here. So the way it's going to play is I've got 5 storylines for Farbod and I to invest in. We each got 50 fake dollars here. So hypothetically, you could do $10 on each storyline and you kind of be spread across them. If there's a storyline you really believe in, you can spend more. If there's one you don't love, you can withhold your money. So Farbod and I are going to be investing $50 into 5 storylines here. These storylines come from the national media. These storylines come from, if you pull up a big time college football podcast, these are the things they're talking about. If you pull up an article from ESPN, CBS Sports, or the other big players, this is what they're talking about. If you pull up, the herd on during the weekdays and you listen to him talk about college football, these are the storylines he'll be talking about. So this game, these aren't necessarily storylines that Farbod and I are coming up with. These are storylines that are big in the world of college football. These are kind of the top 5 most talked about things. Yep, aggregate. It's a great word. So we put them together here. Any other questions or explanations before we jump into this?
No, I'm ready to go. I think this is obviously all with fake money. We're not actually investing in this. We're not going to Kalshi and finding the actual storyline. But this is a good thing for, like, if you're at home and if you hear these storylines and you're like, play the game with us, because it's something that would be fun to keep track of during the season. Obviously, Jason and I have individual storylines that we've come up with that we're keeping track of. But these ones, like the first one, if you really think that the first one, as Jace introduces it, is going to take shape and be like take a mind of its own throughout the season, put $25 into it. It's like, we'll see how it goes.
I love that. All right, let's start with the first one. The first one's a fun one here, and this is a big one. This guy's always kind of a big storyline each year. It starts with Lane Kiffin and the LSU Tigers. So a lot of drama happened this past offseason. Lane Kiffin missed a playoff run, or about to embark on a playoff run, leaves Ole Miss for in-conference team LSU. There was a lot of drama back and forth between Lane Kiffin, former players, bringing new coaches and players over to LSU. was a big riff. And so this year, Lane Kiffin's going to kick off the season in Baton Rouge. He's got talent. He's got a lot more resources than he had at Ole Miss. There's a lot of drama surrounding him. He's now he's off the grid, no longer on social media like he used to be. So that's the storyline. What does Lane Kiffin's year one look like in Baton Rouge? It's an LSU team that has kind of been beaten and battered and failed expectations the last few years with a coach who tends to exceed expectations. So Farbod, the take that's for sale is this. Lane Kiffin and the Tigers take the SEC by storm. They make the conference title game and they reach the college football playoff.
I see. If I'm putting any money into this, first of all, I'm looking at their schedule right now, and their schedule looks fairly manageable. It looks hard, but every SEC schedule you look at is going to look that way. They start out the year with Clemson. We have no idea what Clemson is going to look like this year. Louisiana Tech the week after. The appointment television game, I think, of the season, at least in September, might be Lane Kiffin's return on September 19th back to Ole Miss. They probably have to hire extra security for Lane, for the LSU team. Genuinely, I am scared for what the animosity level. We've seen coaches leave programs. We've seen players transfer out. We've seen people and fan bases have hatred towards another program. We haven't seen a coach abandon his playoff team before the playoffs and leave to another in-conference team. So I don't care what you're doing that day. I hope you're not getting married on that day if you're listening at home, because that game on September 19th, you better be on a couch or at a bar watching the LSU Ole Miss game. Texas A&M, McNeese, I think that's it, on October 3rd. Kentucky, Mississippi State, Auburn. I think through Auburn on October 24th, it's a very manageable schedule. And then they have a kind of a gauntlet of Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee back to back to back, and Arkansas. Before I looked at the schedule, I was like, I'm putting 25 into this, because Lane Kiffin, I think, is, because of his theatrics, people don't like to call him one of the best coaches in the country. But I don't know how you can see what he's done at Ole Miss and not think that, and not just know how much of an offensive mastermind he is. LSU, he has the opportunity to get the defensive body types that he couldn't at Ole Miss on a regular basis, which is why Ole Miss, no matter how good their offense was through the years, they could never catch up to the Georgias until the last 2 years with the portal. They finally brought in the defensive tackles, defensive linemen to at least hang on the field with them. I'm going to put about $15 into this. I wanted to put 25, but I'm going to put about $15. I think if you looked at this at the end of the season and LSU and Lane Kiffin were SEC champs, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Sam Leavitt brought in. They have such a talented team as it is. Last year's team, I don't think anyone thought was bad by any means. It wasn't good either, and it was just weird and toxic under Brian Kelly. This year's team's all excitement. They have expectations. I think Lane's goal is to hopefully build like an evil empire at LSU. Just everyone hates him outside of LSU.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the LSU brand. They got Will Wade on the college basketball side of things, which he's a very similar character to Lane Kiffin in terms of the attention and drama that tends to follow him. And I'm going to put $20 on this take. I'm with you. I believe in him. I believe in the resources. And same thing as you, I think this is a team that's very hungry. They've been disappointing the last few years. I think they finally have a good, rock-solid head coach, at the helm, a guy who knows football inside and out, knows this world of recruiting, of transfer portal. I think he understands the current landscape of college football well. And Lane Kiffin was already a really good coach when he had to get creative and crafty with resources. He was already a really good coach when he was distracted at the local hot Pilates gym. He was already doing all of that. He's still a great coach. Oh yeah, he's just not posting that anymore. Yeah. But I think a Lane Kiffin, where he doesn't have to get crafty with resources, we saw it with Jordan Seaton. He was able to just kind of say, you're going to come here, you'll develop in 2 years, you'll be a first-round draft pick. Here's all this money, kid signs. Like, he doesn't have to be crafty anymore. I think he's a much freer man mentally. The no social media, I think, kind of just shows this focus a little bit. I'm high on LSU this year. I'm going to put $20 on this take and shorthand myself moving forward.
And mind you, we keep talking about what Lane's decision did to Ole Miss, but LSU's investment into him, not only into his contract, but like all the players that he's asked for, he knows for a fact, and he said it himself, this can't be a gap year for LSU. This can't be a rebuilding year just because it's his first year. All the investment, they better be in the final running in the SEC to make the playoff, because that investment for the first year at least would look like a wash at that point if they're not.
Yeah, and I think that's the right mind. The team that he inherited is like full of 4-star, 5-star, highly rated kids. They just haven't had the situation to pan out. So it's, yeah, like you said, it's not like he's inheriting this team that's ready for a rebuild. This is a team that's got the talent to compete now, and he'll have a chance to prove it September 19th. So even September 5th, they got to start with Clemson. You can't overlook that game.
I know we want to move to the second storyline, but think about it like this. Year one at LSU, even if he didn't bring in any defensive players, his defense at LSU is better than any defense he had in his 6 or 7 years at Ole Miss. And we know what kind of offensive coach he is. They should be right in the running.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the SEC, the other teams, I don't want to dive into each team individually, but as a whole, a lot of these teams have a good amount of question marks. A lot of them lost a lot of talent this past year. A lot of them got new head coaches, new faces, new quarterbacks. So I don't think like they're behind the 8 ball because they've got a new QB and a new coach. I think that's very on par with the conference as a whole, which you don't always see. Like the Big Ten's going to have a lot of continuity of head coaches and quarterbacks. But we don't see that in the SEC this year. So I'm not as concerned about the lack of continuity as I might be if it was Ohio State. Exactly. All right. So you've got $15 on storyline number 1 of the Lane Kiffin Tigers. I've got 20 on it. So we both got to get a little strategic here now. So that leads me to storyline number 2. So it's become clear over the last couple of years that the Big Ten and the SEC are now the top dogs in terms of the conference landscape. And it seems like it's by a solid margin. But when you look at the Big Ten and the SEC, there's a lot of conversation about which one's better, who performs better, who's on top. But as it stands, the Big Ten has won the last 3 national championship games, and side note, has also dominated head-to-head against the SEC in the regular season and in bowl games. For how much credit you want to give bowl games, neither here nor there. But the take is this. What's for sale is this. The 2026 national champion will be a Big Ten team.
So you're looking at, I'm on DraftKings right now. I think Jace and I have both joked off pod that until we're a big enough podcast where we have a betting sponsor, we're just going to use different ones every week. Last week we used FanDuel. We're on DraftKings this week. If I'm on DraftKings national championship odds, and if you look at the top 6, 3 of them are Big Ten teams. Ohio State is the best odds in the country. Notre Dame's second, independent, and then the 3 and 4 are SEC. Texas at plus 750, Georgia plus 800, and then 5 and 6 are Oregon and Indiana, 800 and 900 respectively. So if you're just taking the numbers as it is, like 3 out of the 6 teams are in the Big Ten are in the Big Ten. I think the whole mindset heading into this year in general is the same as it was last year. The SEC has some really good teams, but they have a lot of really good teams. So they would eat up, like, if it's a whole debate of who's better, the Big Ten or the SEC. I still think the Big Ten's top dogs are a class above the SEC's top dogs, but last year, dude, it was Indiana versus Miami. I don't think anyone had that going into the year.
Yeah.
I personally will put, I'm gonna say $18 on this. It might be a little steep, but I think if you're looking at Ohio State, they're just rinse and repeat. I don't care who their quarterback is, who their running game features. I don't care who. They have Jeremiah Smith still. I don't care who's on their offensive line. You can just jot them down for 10 to 11 wins every year. They are one of the most recession-proof programs in the country. They are the most recession-proof program. We thought Oklahoma was one of them for a while until Lincoln left Oklahoma. I think Oregon's the best team in the country heading into the year. Ohio State, probably the best team, not named Oregon, in the country. Indiana, everyone, we'll talk a little bit more about them later in the show. Everyone's down on them for some reason. They might have, I don't want to say they upgraded from the first overall pick at quarterback, but they might have. and they brought in Nick Marsh at wide receiver. They still have the same offensive and defensive coordinators that were instrumental to their team last year. Indiana could be back there. I think USC, they would have to get a little creative, but they have a senior quarterback. They have a better offensive line than they did last year. We know Lincoln's calling card on offense. USC has the best chance that they've had in a long time to make the playoff and do some things. If we're looking at this in 6 months and it's Georgia or Alabama or LSU, I'd buy it. They're all really good teams. But for this take specifically, I think the best teams in the country are still probably not named Notre Dame, Big Ten teams.
Yeah. Notre Dame's the one that throws the wrench in this for me, because I feel pretty comfortable saying the Big Ten will be the national champion this year outside of Notre Dame. I think, similar to you, I think Ohio State and Oregon have the best rosters at this point in time. I think they have the highest floors of any team in the country. Indiana, until Cignetti and his coaching staff is dethroned, it's hard to choose against them. That's the best coaching staff in the country. They're always the most well-coached. Since Cignetti's been there, they've been the most well-coached team in the country. Texas is interesting. I think of these top tier teams, the 7 that you mentioned that kind of have the best odds, and there's a big jump. Texas might have the highest ceiling. I think Arch Manning has an unbelievable ceiling. I think Cam Coleman, unbelievable ceiling, that whole team. But they also have maybe the lowest floor of these 7 teams. We saw it last year. This is a very similar team to last year. They had no run game, and they haven't done anything this offseason that really makes me think, that run game's fixed. And that was a big issue in the SEC. So they're polarizing for that. And then Georgia is high floor but low ceiling, and that makes me hard to think that they can make a run to the championship. I just don't know if they have the playmakers on offense to, like we saw with Ole Miss, when they got into a game where the defense couldn't win, and now as we're trading blows, they just didn't have the offensive firepower to keep trading blows. And when your defense isn't making plays, that gets tough. So for that, I love the Big Ten. But then Notre Dame, they sit there and they're such a complete team. They have a quarterback, they have a running back, they have a good wide receiver room, they have probably the best offensive line and one of the best defensive lines in the country. They have Leonard Moore at corner. Notre Dame's the one that throws a wrench in me. I wanted to give this take like $15 or $20. Notre Dame makes me think 10, 15. I might have overspent on LSU. I got excited on storyline 1. So I'm going to go to $10 here. But I feel good about this $10. Notre Dame's the team that scares me in this scenario, but I'll put $10 on.
I agree, and since I've been dubbed the Notre Dame hater, I'll say this: Notre Dame. We keep saying like Oregon's probably the most complete team in the country. Notre Dame's probably the most complete team in the country of actual production. Oregon has a ton of talent, but you and I keep coming away with games and like, oh man, they can't finish that sack. Like, what's the defensive line's awesome in terms of talent, but they can't finish tackles sometimes or something. But like Notre Dame, we've seen it done, and their biggest question marks are their 2 first-round pick running backs, returning those and replacing replacing those. There's over 2,000 yards on the ground, about 312 carries you're replacing. But if there's any program, I don't care who the head coach is at Notre Dame, if there's any program in the country that I trust to replace those with more first-rounders, it's probably Notre Dame. And CJ Carr, we talked about this in our quarterback show a month ago. CJ Carr is probably the best quarterback in the country. That no one wants to admit right now that he's the best quarterback in the country. Like he had a rough game 1 against Miami last year, and then just was poised the entire season after that. They start out 0-2, then go 10 and finish the season 10-2. Yeah, Notre Dame's the one that'll throw the wrench in there.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, CJ Carr, we'll talk a little bit more about QBs. So I guess I don't want to get into it too much. So let's jump to storyline 3 here. Quick recap. Farbod, you had $18 on that. You are now sitting at $33 spent.
I have 17 left.
I put 10 on that one. I've got 30 spent. I got 20 left. All right. Storyline number 3 here. Numerous programs from 2025 to 2026 look entirely reinvented. I'm talking entirely new coaching staffs, new department heads, entirely new rosters. Like they are a completely different team than they were. Other than the branding on the clothes they wear, nothing is the same. Last year, we saw 2 Power 4 teams go through this level of transformation in West Virginia and Oklahoma State, but it felt like it was more scrambling because of last-minute college football landscape changes than it was we need to make a controlled decision here. This is kind of the first year we've seen a lot of teams make calculated reinventions of themselves.
Right.
So name some of them. We've got James Franklin and a lot of his players going from Penn State to Virginia Tech. We've got Matt Campbell and a lot of his players going from Iowa State to Penn State. We've got Alex Golish, Byron Brown, and some role players going from South Florida to Auburn. We've got Eric Morris, Mestamaker, Caleb Hawkins, plus tons of North Texas talent going to Oklahoma State. This is what's for sale, Farbod. These programs see immediate success and an immediate upgrade from 2025 to 2026, despite being completely reinvented.
So you and I aren't like hot take artists. We talk college football. We don't try to give hot takes. So I think the problem with that, with the what's for sale here, is I think other bigger podcasts would end up saying, well, there's no chance of immediate success because recency bias tells us immediate success is Indiana. Like immediate success is a full blown 1-loss first season, no loss, undefeated national title second season. I don't think that's coming to any of these programs. I think you could even throw UCLA into this with Bob Chesney. They didn't fully revamp, but they have like 40 new players on the roster. They still have Nico Jesus. They still have Nico at quarterback. Iamaliava. Good, I had to get that. But more than anything, I'm comfortable only putting like $5 on this. It might seem light, but I think all of these coaches go into their programs. There's an expectation to win, sure, but I think Oklahoma State needed a makeover. Mike Gundy was an excellent coach for decades at Oklahoma State, but his process at Oklahoma State became stale. It became dry. The game had passed him by. So they needed a makeover. So I don't think Oklahoma State's like, yeah, it would be fun for them to be frisky and see immediate success, but I don't think year one under Eric Morris is like, you got to go compete for the Big 12 title. Auburn probably has the most angst of this group of any fan base because they've just been waiting for after they fired Gus Malzahn. It's like, can Brian Harsin do it? No. And then can Hugh Freeze do it? No. They brought in talent. They've been in like a 7-year rebuild at this point. But I still don't think under Alex Golesh it's like, hey, we got to go win the SEC year one, or else it's a failed hire. Matt Campbell, Penn State. I think everyone understands the entire team and recruiting class left him when James Franklin got fired. He brought in his whole Iowa State squad. They should be solid, but I don't expect them to be very like an elite team. So I don't think Penn State fans are like, you better go compete for the Big Ten. And same thing with James Franklin. I think James Franklin's like the light at the end of the tunnel for Virginia Tech fans. Like, can we get to the point where Enter Sandman is a fun entrance song again for a really good Virginia Tech team? I don't think anyone's like, hey, James, you better go win the ACC this year. If this was going into next year, yeah, I think all these guys are going to have like, all right, it's now or never, which is crazy, the world of college football we live in. But that was my long way of saying I'm putting $5 on this take because I don't think either of these coaches has to be good for them to like prove that their rebuild process is going right.
I hate that we keep agreeing, but I'm on the exact same page as you. I'm also planning to put $5 down on this. I think, yeah, it comes down to two things. Number one, how do you define success for these programs? I think for me personally, I would define it as, does the outlook from the season give me hope, at least more hope than it used to, or is it less than? And for some of these teams, I think they're going to achieve that pretty easily. I think Eric Morris at Oklahoma State, they are going to be more successful than they were last year. Was one of the worst Power Four. They had one of the worst Power Four performances in a season that we have seen in a long time. They were horrible. And they had zero hope, zero shining lights. They had zero bright spots. Not a single thing about that program last year gave you any sort of enjoyment. I think they're going to be immediate. They just have to win 3 games and just put up 20 points like twice, and you automatically have success. So that's going to be an easy one. I also think similar James Franklin and Virginia Tech, that's a program that has kind of been a dead program for a little while now. I think as long as they win 6 games, they're immediately vaulted into a better spot than they've been in a while. But on the flip side, Matt Campbell, he was 7-5 last year at Iowa State, and he's bringing a 7-5 Iowa State team to Happy Valley to now play in the Big Ten. I'm not quite and Penn State, for all the jokes about James Franklin that we have made, that everyone makes, at least he was going 9-3. At least they were going 10-2, 9-3, 8-4 in a bad year. I'm not sure that Matt Campbell and this Penn State team is going to be able to do that at all. And by that standard, if they don't win 10 games, I don't know if that's considered success, and I don't think that they will. And then I'm going to go to Golesh and Auburn. I think Alex Golesh, you and I both think he's a phenomenal coach. I love Byron Brown. I think Golesh and Brown alone will win you 5 or 6 games but it's a tough conference. It's a tough schedule, and I don't know if they have enough outside of Byron Brown to make a splash in a really strong SEC. So therefore, two teams I see being better, two teams I see we'll see. I'm going to put $5 as well just to invest in that Eric Morris situation almost is what I'm banking on.
I think the tricky part with Penn State is I don't think like if another unnamed team here hired Matt Campbell, it'd be like, yeah, you got to give him time to rebuild. The problem with Penn State is maybe I was wrong. Maybe Penn State fans have the most angst over Auburn fans. It's because of the hell that James Franklin led them to. And by hell, I mean being a really good team, but not good enough. And that's where all the James Franklin memes were. So Penn State fans look at this year, wrongfully so, in my opinion, as well, we better be competing again. Like our bad year was last year after we fired James. Like we better be right back in the mix because Matt Campbell, it's extremely unfair, but it's like, you got to go show us that why you were a step up. We didn't fire James Franklin to take a step back. We fired him so we can take a step up. I don't think that can happen year one at Penn State. Like they lost too much. They lost too much to the portal. They lost too many recruits that James Franklin had committed there. It was a patch up job that Matt Campbell did the best that he could to field the team this year. But their fans are looking at it. It's infuriating to me because their fans are looking at it as last year was the bad year. Now that Matt Campbell's here, he was hired to be better than James Franklin. He was hired to win the games that James Franklin couldn't. It's just an unfair expectation, I think, that they have on a really good coach.
I agree. And almost, it's going to sound silly, but stick with me here. Almost to the detriment of Matt Campbell and Penn State fans, they have a really easy schedule this year.
Yeah.
The reason why that's a detriment is they look at the schedule, they can get to 6-0, 7-0 with ease, like they should.
Yeah.
That'll put them top 10 in the country. That just sets them up for their first big matchup to lose. And if they lose another big game, they fired Franklin, the guy who couldn't win a big one. They have a big one again and they lose. That's just going to set them over the edge. And like you said, it's not fair to Matt Campbell. Aside from the players he brought in from Iowa State, they lost damn near every competent player after James Franklin was fired. And he lost like every recruit as well. So he kind of had to start from scratch. And like I said, it was a 7-5 Iowa State roster. There's some good pieces. Rocco Beck, not a bad quarterback. Ben Brahmer, a pretty good tight end. But it's not this elite roster that's going to come in and dominate in the Big Ten. If it was a hard schedule and they're just kind of consistently losing these big games, you kind of get the feeling, all right, it's a new team, new year. But the schedule is set up for them to have to play a big game. Their first real team is also the first big game. That's just a recipe for disaster. They'll be a very interesting storyline to follow this season, which is why they're in this storylines part here.
Now to put a bow on this storyline, it's not like we haven't seen it before. I don't think anyone 3 years ago was saying, hey, I don't think Curt Cignetti is going to have immediate success at Indiana bringing in a bunch of James Madison players. Now, that James Madison team in their conference went pretty much undefeated, I think. And Iowa State went 7-5. But I guess we'll have to see how those players translate to the Big Ten style of football.
Yep.
I don't know. Penn State's going to be, even if you don't care about the Big Ten at home or if you don't care about Penn State, you should watch. Just keep an eye on their fan base. They're going to blow up the second they lose a game. I know I'm rambling. I almost think it would be better for them to go into one of those games that you're saying, like they're 6-0, they're going into a big game. Just get blown out. Like their fan base needs to see like, hey, we're not good enough yet. Matt Campbell needs time to build this, because if they're close and they lose a 1.5 score game, then everyone's gonna be like, oh, we hired James Franklin 2.0.
Yeah, it's going to be USC on October 10th, and then the following weekend's at Michigan. So that's you probably go into that USC game 5 and ranked top 15 in the country, maybe top 10. USC presumably would be ranked up there with them. And Michigan potentially also ranks. It could be a harsh reality if they're 5-0 and you lose a close one at home to USC, you lose a close one on the road at Michigan. Like you said, it could be all hell breaks loose. So pay attention to your Penn State fans. Also, if you have friends that are Penn State fans, you might have to do a check-in on them on Sunday.
Give them a hug.
Yeah. All righty. So moving forward, I've got $15 left for 2 more storylines. you've got $12 for 2 storylines. So let's jump into it. So storyline number 4, the 2026 NFL draft was vaunted a little bit as a down year for talent going to the NFL. But when you have a down year, that sets you up for a big year. The 2027 NFL draft for years now has been, dubbed one of the best draft classes we've ever seen, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. So far in NFL history, there's been 2 seasons where 6 quarterbacks have been drafted on the first day of the NFL draft. That's the most ever. Happened in 1983. And in 2024, relatively recently, that's the Caleb Williams draft class. This year has a lot of big names that are being vaunted in the first round, Farbod. What is for sale is that the college football quarterbacks in 2026 live up to the hype, and we see 7 or more QBs drafted on day 1, making it the most quarterbacks drafted in NFL history on the first day. Let me throw some names at you because it sounds like a lot until you start hearing them. Dante Moore, Arch Manning, CJ Carr, Darian Mensah, Drew Mestamaker, Lenora Sellers, Sam Levitt, Julian Sayin, Trinidad Chambliss, Jaden Mayava, CJ Bailey, Byron Brown, plus others that could build their name up over the year. But those are just the highly vaunted ones that are draft eligible at the end of the season.
I am going to put $4 on this. I think very well you could see 7 guys drafted, but I also know even in a year, like in a year that there's 2 or 3 quarterbacks, teams will reach for them. Make sure they can get them in with their first round pick. But after whatever you want to call the cream of the crop, right now we might look at it and say it's Dante, Arch, and CJ Carr. If those guys are gone, there's going to be another team, the top 10, top 15 of the NFL draft, that's like, I got to get Sam Levitt or I got to get Julian Sayin. Whatever the tier 2 ends up looking like, according to whatever, Mel Kiper of quarterbacks, I seriously believe there's like enough teams out there that are like, well, why take Lenora Sellers now when I can take Jaden Mayava with my second round pick? And whatever you think of those 2 quarterbacks, I'm more so saying like the next batch, the next tier of quarterbacks, that's what it's going to be looked at as. I think Trinidad Chambliss could be a top of the round, maybe even the first overall pick, or he could be more of the Jalen Hurts late first, early second cut. Some team trades up into the second round pick 4 and takes one of these guys. I also am looking at it a little cynically of saying this isn't the first year that we've looked at the next year's quarterback draft and we're like, oh my God, look at the quarterbacks next year. Carson Beck was the first overall mock for this past draft 2 years ago.
Nussmeier.
And now, Nussmeier, Garrett Nussmeier.
Klubnik.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. All of those guys had NFL talent, but they fell off heading into the draft. I don't want to predict that Darian Mensah is going to fall off. The problem is like all of these quarterbacks that we're seeing right now, Dante Moore, Arch Manning, CJ Carr, Darian Mensah. I'll throw Sam Levitt into this and Julian Sayin, Trinidad Chambliss, and Jaden Mayava. Those are the quarterbacks that, okay, the offensive coach or the offensive system is going to work. Their team's going to be good. They're going to have the limelight and they're going to have the opportunity to make plays. If all of them stay healthy, that's probably your 6. And then, or that's probably like 5 of them at least in your first round. After that, Drew Mestamaker, you and I are high on him based off of what he did at North Texas. Can he do that in the Big 12? Can he do that for like we keep saying Oklahoma State's going to be frisky this year. Do we know that? Like they did just bring up a bunch of North Texas players, and I buy that, sure. But still, do we know that for sure? CJ Bailey, NC State, Byron Brown moving from USF to Auburn. There's a lot of quarterbacks here that are like, all right, we could have more than 7 quarterbacks drafted in the first round based off of projections on August 9th as we're recording this. But do we know that? And this is also assuming they all stay healthy. Sorry, I'm very long-winded today.
Yeah, no, that I think you hit the nail on the head with this one. This was a fun storyline, I think, for 2 big reasons. Number one, I think it's the hardest to pick. I think it's the hardest to determine, do I want to buy it? Do I not? And it's also maybe the most fun in terms of when I was kind of putting together these names, it was kind of like, man, we have some really good college quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
It's a bad year to be a defense is kind of what I'm getting at. There are so many good quarterbacks that have stayed, so many good quarterbacks that have found like new homes for the betterment of themselves. These are going to be really fun quarterbacks to follow all season long for a plethora of reasons. Heisman, all these teams are going to be in contention for big things. these guys potential first round picks. If you're like me and you're in a dynasty league for fantasy football, you love watching these kind of guys, right? I think we get a minimum of 5. I think Dante Moore, Darian Mensah, Drew Mestamaker, Trinidad, and then one of Arch, CJ, Sam, Julian, Jaden, CJ Bailey, or Byron Brown will go in the first round. The big question mark for me is like guys like Arch Manning, CJ Carr, I believe even in Julian Sayin and Jaden Mayava, none of those guys have to leave for the draft. Like even Dante Moore doesn't have to. I assume he will. But for any of these guys, you're kind of in a scenario where if their team has a disappointing end of the year in the NIL era, it's pretty reasonable to think they could get a good check and come back. Dante Moore did it last year. I could see if Notre Dame loses in the semifinals in heartbreaking fashion, I could see CJ Carr coming back. I could see Mayava coming back if they think USC is really building something. So that's what makes this so hard to project as well is, are these guys going to leave? Are they not? I have $15 to spend. I'm going to hedge myself here, and I'm going to put $8 on this one and kind of cut them in half. I'm torn. I think the talent is there. I unequivocally, these guys are talented enough to make this take happen. But do they pan out, 1, and 2, do they all decide to go? Because there's also the fallacy of if I'm projected to be 30th overall this year, if I'm Jaden Mayava, what if I let Dante Moore leave college football? I let Arch Manning, I let CJ Carr, I let Darian Mensah, I let all these guys leave. Instead of going pick 30, I want to go pick 1. I'll let these guys go. And then next year, I'll be the highly vaunted guy. But then the downside is, do I want to be a New York Jet? Do I want to be, one of those? Do I want to be a Giant? Versus, I could go pick 30 and I'm going to go back up Mahomes for 2 years and get the job. Or obviously, it's a bad example, but you know what I mean. You go back up a good quarterback like Jared Goff and then be the Lions guy. So there's a whole head game. I want to put 7. I think these guys have the talent to make it happen. Do the dominoes fall for it to actually happen is the question mark. We'll find out later.
You said 2024 was one of the 2 times that there were 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. I'm looking at those 6. Caleb Williams, Heisman, and was in multiple Heisman conversations after that. Jaden Daniels, Heisman. Drake May really just didn't have a lot of around him at North Carolina, but I think everyone he was the guy that kept getting NIL offers to leave North Carolina, and he kept making it known, guys, I'm like a 7-time legacy here. I'm not leaving. This is home. I'm not leaving North Carolina. And he was awesome. Michael Penix lost the national title game. Amazing college football quarterback. JJ McCarthy, national champion. Pretty iffy, but national champion. Bo Nix, just a super, super senior quarterback, did everything right. But I will say, even though where our fandom lies, we think the world of Bo Nix. But at the same time, we also know that if Sean Payton's offense wasn't what Sean Payton's offense was, he was probably going to fall out of the first round. People called the Bo Nix pick a reach. Now, if you're looking at the quarterbacks this year, you don't see that in a lot of these guys. It's like Dante, you have some questions, but you're probably the most gifted. CJ Carr, the most poised, has a lot of talent. Arch Manning, the name and the talent's there. Can you put it together? Darian Mensah, we don't know. We've seen a lot of good, a lot of bad. Drew Messamaker, we don't know anything at all. Lenora Sellers, can we finally see you be good for a consistent basis? Julian Sayin, I think, is the most like what you see, what you get. He's an awesome quarterback. May not do amazing things, but he's awesome. Trinidad's going to do crazy things. What I'm trying to say is there's no Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, without a doubt guy in this group for me. That guy's won the Heisman. He's ready to go. Sam Levitt last year entering the year was the number 1 quarterback in the country, according to multiple people, was basically leaving Arizona State by week 5. So there's a lot of changes that'll happen. I think that's just to back my $4 on this.
Yeah. I think my end take is the talent is there. The skill is there. The potential is there. But can they put it together for 12 games like Lenora Sellers, like you said? We'll see. Do they decide that staying 1 more year is more profitable for them long term than going to the NFL draft? We'll see. But it's a fun name of quarterbacks.
The last thing I was actually going to bring up about USC and Jaden Mayava is, I think I've said it a couple podcasts ago, there's of those quarterbacks, there's a lot of quarterbacks we haven't even mentioned because they could be really high risers this year. Josh Hoover, Indiana. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that we haven't even brought up yet that I guarantee you one of those guys will be a first round quarterback. So it's more a matter of how far are we from there. But if I'm looking at just a riser from here, if USC has a year that USC wants to have, I don't know if they will. I don't remember a quarterback who spent 3 to 4 years with Lincoln Riley that hasn't won the Heisman. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Jada Mayo is entering his third year with Lincoln Riley. This is his time. Like, you expect his Lincoln Riley bump to happen now.
Yeah. And they've got talent at wide receivers. There's a lot of rumors that this is like one of the better O lines they've had in some time. This is going to be a really good USC team. It's kind of flying under the radar, which, I mean, that could have been a whole other storyline in and of itself. But for the sake of time, we will jump to storyline number 5. Obviously, due to money limitations, we know what's happening here, Farbod. Whether you like it or not, you're spending $8 on this storyline. Whether I like it or not, I'm spending $7 on this storyline. The storyline goes like this. Brendon Sorsby was kind of the golden goose of the Big 12 coming into this season. He was supposed to be the guy to take Texas Tech to new heights, give the Big 12 a true championship contender. A lot of people are saying the Big 12 chances of a true championship contender disappeared along with Brendon Sorsby's DraftKings account. What's for sale is this. Yeah, he's also looking for a betting partner.
Yeah.
What's for sale? The Big 12 repeats last year's goose egg and has 0 wins in the 2026 college football playoff. We can debate it, but you've got $8 on it. I've got $7 on it. We can talk about if we even like that or not for ourselves.
I think it's probably fair. Like I'm looking at it. I think BYU and Texas Tech are still expected to be the class of the conference. ASU, people keep writing the Big 12 off as if ASU wasn't a play away from beating Texas 2 years ago in the playoff. Like the Big 12 has teams that can make things happen. The problem is knowing which teams. The last year, because the conference is nuts, but they all should be interesting. Last year, we talked about it with Logan, but last year during the Big 12 media days, their commissioner was asked, like, do you guys, now that Texas and Oklahoma are gone, you call yourself the deepest conference because every one of your teams can compete with each other. But do you guys eventually need another Texas and Oklahoma? As in, not brand, because I don't know if Utah can ever get to the Texas brand level or Kansas State can ever get to Oklahoma's brand level. But can you get to a point where year in and year out, the rest of the conference is solid, but you have 1 to 2 teams that are going to take the league by storm, and they are the teams to beat, and they are nationally revered as a team to beat. And he said, yes, we love the parity, but we also need a team that will go and beat other conferences on the national stage so we can continue to grow our conference. And Texas Tech was their golden goose. Texas Tech was the team that, like, all right, they made it deep into the playoff last year through the bye. They got manhandled by Oregon, and they had it basically like a prerogative at leaving that game. It was like, all right, the defense is good. We have the body types. We have the investment. We have to go make sure the offense is up to snuff with the Big Ten and the SEC schools, so we have a shot in the playoff. Texas Tech went out and got Brendon Sorsby, and now they have, because of the Brendon Sorsby stuff, Will Hammond's going to start for them. I think BYU is being slept on. I think Bear Bachmeier is a really good quarterback, and he's entering just his true sophomore year as a quarterback, and their team was really good last year. So it's more of a question of, I think BYU can do it. I think Texas Tech still has the bodies, the talent to do it. Do they have the high-level talent that they could have with Brendon Sorsby? Probably not. But I don't think Will Hammond is just a wash as a quarterback. I think he was solid. So I think they can have a team to win a game. If I were putting money on it today, as I am putting eight fake dollars on this in the stock market game, I wouldn't be surprised if they got shut out of a win in the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure if they're going to do it or not. It would depend on the draw. I don't feel that a Big 12 team is good enough to go out and take down one of the top dogs in the Big 10. I don't think any of these teams are good enough to take down one of the top dogs in the SEC. I think in order for me to feel confident, they would have to get a favorable draw one way or another, which once you start banking on a favorable draw and some luck in that regard, I think you would say, yeah, I'm not buying this. So, or I guess in this case, because it's no wins is for sale, I would be comfortable putting a lot of money on it. with the sense that I just don't think they're going to get a win. I will say with Texas Tech, when Sorsby was kind of ruled ineligible and when that ship sailed, a lot of people just immediately wrote off Texas Tech and
But
kind
they're
of
still the class of the conference.
agreed. And Will Hammond I don't think he's a bum. I don't think he's just some random backup that's going to come in and stink. When he came in last year and played in a few games for Texas Tech, he was really good. And yes, the competition was maybe a little weaker, but that was the best their offense looked all season was with Will Hammond. And Aaron Morton was very one-dimensional. He can sit in the pocket and throw. Will Hammond was much more athletic, and I thought he gave that offense a level of, it took them, they were more dynamic with him in the offense is what I'm trying to say. And his arm, I didn't think his arm was any worse than Baron Morton's. I think Will Hammond has potential. I think people are not talking about Will Hammond as a competent starting quarterback nearly as much as they should. So I would not be shocked if Texas Tech took the conference by storm, dominated, goes to the playoff, and has a chance because Will Hammond is truly that good. That's a real possibility. I wanted to shout him out. I think he's getting criminally underrated. And then, like you said with BYU, I'll save it because I know we have a little bit more BYU conversation to come. But I think that's a really formidable team that could also take this conference by storm. That's a team that has a lot going for them positively. Push comes to shove. Can they beat Signetti and Indiana in a first-round matchup? I don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
Can they beat LSU and Lane Kiffin in a first-round matchup? I don't know if I feel good about that. But can they comfortably go 11-1 in regular season play in the Big 12? Absolutely.
But remember, I just remembered this. The playoff structure from last year to this year is different than the first round of the 12-team playoff, where if you won your conference, you'd automatically be in the top 4 seeds, get a bye, and you would play like last year it happened for Texas Tech where they played Oregon after they got the bye. But there's a good chance that the Big 12 conference champ this year is 10-2 Texas Tech, 10-2 BYU. Maybe Utah sneaks in there. Arizona State, no one's talking about. There's a good chance that the Big 12 conference champ is not ranked in the top 4 of the college football playoff. They don't get a bye. And let's say they're number 5. They get James Madison. That's, I think, where I would put it. Like, I think if they played Georgia in the first round, probably a harder path for them to get a win. But if you tell me like that team's going to be the 5 seed or 6 seed and they're going to get Tulane, like, yeah, okay, all right, I think BYU can handle Tulane. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, Texas Tech and BYU to me have the ability to beat a Big Ten or an SEC school, but like when you look, so quick overview here. Big 12 teams' odds to just make the college football playoff doesn't have to be conference champion, just make it in general. Texas Tech minus 200, BYU plus 330. Those are the 2 teams I think have the juice to go out and beat a good team. But then you got Utah plus 350, Kansas State plus 750, Houston 850, Arizona 1,000, ASU and TCU 1,200. Everyone else is way beyond that. Not that these are bad teams by any means, but I just think when you look at the quality of team that's going to come out of the Big Ten, that's going to come out of the SEC and the ACC with Miami and probably Notre Dame, I just don't think Utah and beyond is going to have the juice to hang with any of those teams. Like you said, it's going to take getting the right draw to come out with a win. And I guess we'll kind of, what's fun is we'll get the BYU Notre Dame game early in the season, and that'll be a good understanding of, okay, how does good litmus test for how the Big 12 stands in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think the Big 12 has a team good enough that gives me confidence they can just go beat anybody. But they've got some teams that if they get a Boise State or if they get a Texas A&M who sneaks in as an 11 seed and they're just not quite that good, maybe they could make something happen for sure. Hard to bet on the luck of the draw is kind of where I think both of us have the hesitance pull on this one.
All right. So that was the stock market game, our CFB national media storyline stock market game. We had the most money into Lane Kiffin's LSU team. And then it kind of, honestly, it went down from there. We had a little bit more money in the national champion being Big Ten, programs seeing immediate success, less money, quarterbacks a little bit less, and then talking about the Big 12's chances at a playoff win. But now that we've gone through the national media's storylines, there's some more storylines to get through. We'll try to get through as much of them as we can. I know we're already getting close to an hour, so I'm gonna skip all of them because I think the last one is where we should start, Jace.
I like that.
Indiana's title defense. I'm really curious about this storyline because Indiana's our defending national champion. Did you see the Purdue AD get hired in his press conference on like Thursday?
Yes.
For those who didn't see it, Purdue hired a new athletic director, and he tried to make a quick-witted joke. He tried to take a crack at Indiana, and he's like, "When you come to Purdue, you compete for championships, unlike Indiana." And it's like, guys, they just won the national title, and that like oversight brought it up in my mind of why is the Indiana brand still so overpoweringly bad that people don't expect anything out of them this year. I've seen people on Twitter saying like Indiana's a really good chance to miss the playoff. And you don't want to say that they upgraded a quarterback from the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. So I'm not going to say that. But Josh Hoover held his own at TCU. Now he's entering a system and a scheme that we've seen work well for 2 quarterbacks so far, with an offensive line and receiving core that's working really well. They have Charlie Becker back at wide receiver. They have Nick Marsh they brought in from Michigan State, who people are probably a little down on, but he's extremely talented. I guess my point is this might not be the best Indiana team in Kursignetti's 3 years, but I don't see it being dramatically worse than last year. I'm confused why people are so down on them entering this year. And I'm not saying the betting markets are down on them. I'm saying like people, just a natural conversation on Twitter and social media is, man, they probably won't make the playoff.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on this one. My personal opinion is Indiana's going to be a wagon round 2. They're going to be as good as they were last year. Someone's going to have to figure them out, or like, unless somebody does figure them out, I don't really see a world where they don't just steamroll all their way through a national championship, because no one's proven to figure out Cignetti quite yet. And people, I think people, to answer your question though, I think people are down or keep questioning Indiana because of the brand thing. As we know with college football, your brand image and the way people feel about your logo tend to direct people's opinions about your team, regardless if it's valid or not. And I think we're seeing that with Indiana. I think people think of Indiana as a nobody. They think of, and rightfully so. Up until last year, they've been a nobody in college football. If you look at any list before 2025, that is ranking every Power 4 program throughout their history, Indiana is going to be a bottom 2 or 3 team in every single list, rightfully so. And I think that brand association, the association of just how dead they've always been, I think still lingers with people. And I think people are willing to attribute last year as luck more than they are willing to attribute it to they're genuinely just that good. Because I think if I were to tell you, like, let's talk about Ohio State's national championship team from 2 years ago. If we went into 2025 after Ohio State came off a championship and I told you they retained their head coach, both their coordinators, and every staffer, they're retaining the majority of their defense, who are now like 24, 25 years old. They're retaining the majority of their O-line, who is now 23, 24, 25 years old. They've got the second best wide receiver transfer in the country, who's 6'4", 220, who was a high recruit out of high school. They've got a stud wide receiver coming back, and they're going to have a quarterback coming in as a transfer who we saw with the last 2 QBs, right? They were not great. Come to Indiana, they're amazing. This guy was better than both of them were before they came into Indiana. What's to say he's not going to be even better then? So I think it's just the brand of Indiana is why people get hesitant, because everything's going their way. They retain the coordinators. They're retaining the schemes. They're retaining a lot of the starters and a lot of the talent who we applauded them because all of these starters were so disciplined. They knew the scheme. We've never seen college teams execute a scheme the way that they did last year.
Unless they were cheating.
Unless they were cheating. And guess what? Those schemes, they're back. Those players, they're back. And they have an upgraded wide receiver, maybe, and maybe an upgraded quarterback. And then their schedule is pretty damn easy. If I'm being honest, North Texas, that's going to be a win. Howard, that's a win. Northwestern Kentucky, win. Northwestern, win. Rutgers, win. Nebraska, win. Ohio State, first big game of the year, home game at least. At Michigan could be a solid team, but it's Indiana. I still don't know if I'm writing that off. And then you go Minnesota home, USC home, at Washington, Purdue. It's a pretty favorable schedule. Do you really see more than 2 losses in this? I don't think so. Yeah, I think
I almost wonder if it's like, if you look at if it's not even brand related or hater related, and more it's just them saying, well, Ohio State and Oregon aren't going to let it happen again this year. Or like the rest of the Big Ten is just better. Maybe that's part of it. But like you just read off their schedule, that's a cakewalk. Like if maybe they're just like, all right, Oregon's bringing back their quarterback, they're bringing back all their entire defensive line, they're bringing back a really the best wide receiver room in the country. Ohio State's bringing back. Honestly, people aren't talking about it enough. Julian's saying, I said it about CJ Carr and Dante Moore already, so it might just become a running bit with me. But Julian's saying might be the best quarterback in the country, and Ohio State's bringing him back. They have they're going to be really good too. So maybe it's people thinking, oh, the other teams in the conference are taking a step up, but it just confuses me why they think because the other teams are going to do it, why Indiana can't. Like so, I expect the Big Ten to be kind of a cage match again this year.
Yeah, and the most important aspect to a team in college football is your coaching staff. I've never seen, let me put it this way. Every really good team that's ever existed in college football, their coaching staff was amazing. Every team that had a really good roster, but they just kind of stunk for some reason, go look at their coaching staff. Probably kind of a dud. They have the best coaching staff in the country. We saw it last year. They had an insane rare ability to retain some of the best staffers in the country. They've kept them all. I don't, unless you randomly think that this coaching staff forgot how to coach football, I just don't see a world where they take a step back.
If you are like, just to double down on your coaching staff point, everyone talks about Nick Saban as the best coach of all time, and he is. He's gathered the best players. He's coached the best. He's won 7 national titles. Like, Nick Saban is elite. But you're also looking at Alabama's, look at Alabama's 2015 coaching staff. Head coach Nick Saban, offensive coordinator, the highest paid coach in the SEC, Lane Kiffin. He's at LSU. The defensive coordinator, 2-time national championship head coach at Georgia, Kirby Smart. The offensive line coach, Mario Cristobal, was in the national title game last year. Wide receiver coach, Billy Napier. Tough drive at Florida, was pretty bad there, but I mean, he's had success in other places, and he's at James Madison as a head coach. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a head coach somewhere else again, but he really failed at Florida. But regardless, was the wide receivers coach at Alabama that year. The linebackers coach, Tosh Lupoy, head coach at Cal. Mel Tucker's the defensive backs coach, was the head coach at Colorado, Michigan State before he was creepy. And then, GA, Dan Lanning, head coach at Oregon. So that was the peak of Alabama football when they had that. One of the reasons, other than NIL and just getting older, than Nick Saban retired a couple years ago, you look at that staff, and the staff was a lot worse. And it's like, I can't do it all by myself. I don't care how good of a coach I am. And Indiana's coaching staff, we all expected their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator to leave after the season they had. Honestly, people encourage them to, because they're like, it doesn't matter if you go out and have another good year next year. You're not going to have undefeated national champion, first overall pick at quarterback kind of hype to your name as a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. Go cash in while you can. They're both back, and Chris Netti's there. Indiana should be good. Just to keep it rolling, let's go back up to the top of our list. I want you to bring up the Ole Miss topic.
Yes, this is kind of a fun one. So again, Farbod and I just wanted to find some underdiscussed storylines and topics to talk about this year. And one of them that struck me the other day as I was listening to Josh Pate's podcast is I want to talk about Ole Miss a little bit. So if you look at the coaches poll, obviously just came out. And then if you look at any like media outlets, ESPN's way too early, top 25, and you look at people's projections and you read stuff online, a team that is just kind of penciled into the top 10 and no one's really questioning it all is Ole Miss. I think from a outside perspective, made the playoff last year, won a couple playoff games, returned one of the most electric quarterbacks in the country, Trinidad Chambliss, returned one of the best running backs in the country, Kawan Lacey. Yeah, why wouldn't they be good? Of course they're going to be really good. And that's fair. I think it's fair to see that from the outside and be like, yeah, no, I don't need to question this team. And I'm not saying I'm off Ole Miss or I think they're going to be bad, but I want to have a conversation about Ole Miss that is, are we so confident that they are going to just repeat and be really good again? So let me start to make a case of why I want to have this conversation. All right, first things first, outside of returning Trinidad and Lacey, they lost 13 total starters, 6 on the offensive side of the ball, 7 on the defensive side of the ball. And in order to replace those 13 starting spots, the majority of those are trying to be filled by the portal. They didn't have a lot of like big name recruits or big athletes that they felt like could come step in the O-line, step in the D-line, the tight end room, linebacker room. So they had to go out into the portal to fill those spots. And I think immediately when you're filling the majority of your starting roster spots with portal players, you're opening the door. Yes, they can really pan out, Trinidad Chambliss, but also they can really hurt you. You can really, if they don't pan out, you don't have depth. Now you don't have a good starter or depth, and you're really hurting yourself, especially in the SEC. And part of that is your top 3 wide receivers are all gone. So you're replacing all of them with portal players. Right. And then your top tight end, who is an elite tight end, by the way, and Daquan Wright, also gone, who you are now trying to replace. So that's your 4 best receiving options for your QB are all gone. That's new chemistry you have to build. That's them learning playbooks. It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure in that regard. Also, I think an important thing to look at is Trinidad Chambliss. One of the benefits he had last season is he was completely new to the SEC. Going into the year, he wasn't even on anyone's radar. I guarantee you, week 1, Kirby Smart, you asked him who Trinidad Chambliss was, like, who? He probably had no idea who the kid was. And he comes onto the scene, and to Ole Miss and Trinidad's benefit here, I'm not saying this is why he was good, but to his benefit, there was no film on Trinidad Chambliss. There was no scouting reports. Nobody knew what to do, how to stop him, his strengths or weaknesses. But with a year under his belt, or SEC with a year of Trinidad Chambliss, there's a world where they have a year of film. Now, some guys are, no amount of game planning is going to stop them. I'll use Josh Pate's example. Like Cam Newton could have played in the SEC for a decade, and there was never going to be a year where you slowed him down. Trinidad could be that good to where no amount of game planning and effort is going to slow him down. But there's a world where, just like we see sophomore slumps in the NFL, rookie quarterbacks, they come in, they perform really well. Nobody really knows them. You give guys an off season and a year to watch film and really analyze that. Good coaches will figure something out. And so that's a potential thing with Trinidad Chambliss that I wanted to bring up. Sorry, I know I'm going long here, but I want to get through these points. Yeah. Ole Miss, they lost a lot of talented coaches. You lose your coordinators. You lose Lane Kiffin, who everywhere Lane Kiffin's gone, jokes aside, he's built quickly. And he's brought in really good staffers. He's brought in really good players. He has a good eye for talent. He has good schemes, good staffers. Those guys all went with Lane Kiffin to LSU. And now Ole Miss because they had to do this right before the playoff, they quickly hired from within. Probably the right call in the short term when you're trying to make a playoff run. But is that the right call long term? You've talked a lot on this podcast about the downside to just hiring from within without doing your due diligence. It's fair to question, did Ole Miss do their due diligence looking around, or did they just promote from within because the playoff was coming up? And is that going to be the best long-term solution? That remains to be seen. And then the last thing I'll say is they have a really tough schedule. They play 8 home games, which I think people read and were like, oh, dude, 8 home games for a team at the top QB. But they're tough games. They play Louisville at home, who's no slouch with Jeff Brom. They got LSU at home. We've talked about that game. That's going to be a big game. Missouri at home, Auburn at home, new look Auburn. We'll see how that goes. Georgia at home is no cakewalk. And then you got 3 easier ones in Mississippi State, Charlotte, Wofford. They're away games. Yes, it's only 4, but listen to these away games. At Florida, that's your easiest one probably. At Vandy.
That's not going to be fun.
Yeah, not going to be a fun one. Neither of those games are fun to play. And then at Texas, at Oklahoma. 2 very difficult games. I'm just saying there's a world where this team is 8-4 and you barely lose to Texas, you barely lose to Oklahoma, you barely lose to Georgia. And then it's, maybe you lose to LSU in heartbreaking fashion. And all of a sudden, this team that we kind of just penciled into the top 10 is 8-4, sitting at 20th in the country. I'm curious your thoughts. Am I reaching by looking into this, or is this valid thinking here?
I'm looking at it. So here, you know how my brain works sometimes trying to piece together an argument or a take, and it's like, you have to just bear with me here. When you're rebuilding in the NFL, what the rebuild's probably going to work if you hit on the head coach, the quarterback, and the left tackle. If those 3 are there, you still have to get good players and pencil them in right and scheme them up right and everything. But if you have to get the quarterback, head coach, and left tackle right, that's what. Look at the Lions: Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, Penei Sewell, or at that point it was Decker still. But regardless, they get the offensive line right, get the quarterback right. If you are entering a college football year, 3 years ago, whatever you think of Michigan, Harbaugh, they had Harbaugh, they had J.J. McCarthy entering his senior year. They had the best offensive line in football. Nothing else mattered. Their defensive line was probably the best D-line in football, too. They didn't really have great receivers, whatever. Really good run game, really good offensive line, really good defensive line. Nothing else mattered. Undefeated national championship. Last year, 2 years ago, Ohio State, you walk in, Will Howard entering his senior year with Jeremiah Smith and Mecca Ibuka on the outside, Ryan Day's the head coach, Chip Kelly's the play caller, like head coach, offensive line, weapons, and a senior-laden defense. Last year, Indiana, head coach, Cursignetti hit. Fernando Mendoza, senior year quarterback, poised, makes the plays in big time arm, hit. Offensive line, I don't know if they gave up a sack all year.
Yeah.
Like that stuff hit. So when you're looking at this Ole Miss team, you're like, okay, well, does the head coach hit? I don't know. It could in a year or two, but I'm jaded towards Pete Golding. I honestly think there's been, it might just be a personal problem, but when Pete Golding was Nick Saban's defensive coordinator at Alabama, and it's not like reported this, but Pete Golding was going to be fired. At least it was insinuated that Pete Golding was going to be fired by Nick Saban, but because he's like one of Saban's like disciples, he didn't want him to get the embarrassment of getting fired. So he called up another disciple in Lane Kiffin saying, can you hire him as defensive coordinator? Or do you have a spot for him on staff? And Lane needed that. Lane needed the Alabama defense to come into Ole Miss, and it ended up being a win-win for everybody. But maybe I'm looking at it jaded. Like I said, this isn't confirmed reports, but basically his rise to this point is because he would have gotten fired at Alabama. And then he got hired from within here. You can only be the hero to your coaching staff and your players for so long, being the guy who stuck around after the evil Lane Kiffin left you. I don't love that he was hired from within. I don't love what he did with Luke Farrelly in Clemson, just stealing a player after he enrolled in Clemson. But you look at this team, the head coach, I don't know if it's a hit. Quarterback is a hit. You're right. He could take a step down now that there's a book on him, but Trinidad's electric.
He's a hit. Yeah.
And he's entering his super senior year too. Kewan Lacey, maybe it's because he's at Ole Miss. I don't know why he's not talked about more as the best running back in the country. I can't believe that Lane couldn't get him to go to LSU. Kewan Lacey is so good. Wide receivers, yes, they replaced everybody. Offensive line, to be honest, the thing I'm looking at, it looks like their first rotation of their offensive line, they only replaced their right tackle. Now, that doesn't mean the rest of the guys aren't elite. I mean, aren't like bad or have to build up, but their offensive line has some sustainability from last year. Tight end, I don't know. We'll have to see. So I guess my point is, when you're looking at this Ole Miss team from last year, the quarterback's a hit. Offensive weapons are maybe, but they have a really good quarterback. They have a really good running back. They hired from outside their offensive coordinator. Depends on if he's a hit or not. I don't know. I think I'm probably there with you. They are more likely than not to not make the playoff. They have a hard schedule. They have a lot of things involved, but they are all in, man. Like you don't hire that quickly unless you wanted to go for the national title last year, which they did with Pete Golding. And then now this year, it's like you have a super senior quarterback. You have to try to win it with him. So I don't know. I do expect probably a step down for Ole Miss.
It's a hard team to predict, which is why I wanted to bring them up. And if you're curious what Vegas thinks, they have the 13th best odds to make the college football playoff at plus 2,200. So even Vegas is like, they're close. They're right on the edge, which I think is kind of the point of bringing this up is like, I don't know if they're a lock for the playoff, but I don't think they're a lock to miss. I think they're one of those teams right on the edge. And it's probably going to come down to, can you beat one of Texas or Oklahoma on the road? Last year, they won a lot of games because of Trinidad magic. Can they connect? Is that sustainable? And some quarterbacks like Trinidad, it always is. It just feels like Josh Allen's kind of one of those guys in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's just every time, like you think it's magic, you think it's luck, but at the end of the day, it's just that this guy is really good. Trinidad, right, I think, is that level. But I do think it's going to come down to, can they beat one of Texas or Oklahoma on the road? And they're going to have to beat one of LSU and Georgia at home. If you think they can win 2 of those 4 games, this is a playoff team. You can get them at plus 2,200. Pretty good odds.
All right, we have like 3 more storylines, about an hour 10 into this, so let's try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to skip the BYU one, because we talked about BYU. If you want to talk about it, we can hit it at the end. Here's an interesting storyline. I thought about this yesterday because at the time of recording, it's Sunday, August 9th. This podcast obviously is going to be released Monday, August 10th. But yesterday, I saw a Twitter clip of Texas's transfer wide receiver Cam Coleman making a ridiculous catch. And I thought it was you saw the duality of man depending on the responses to it. Most people were like, "Oh my god, what a play! That guy's elite." And then you also saw some people saying, "Wait, who threw that ball? Like, is that Arch? Like, did he throw it that far behind Cam that he had to make that crazy play to even come down with it?" But regardless, it got my mind thinking of. I think you and I have talked about this on the show before. Everyone's really high on Jeremiah Smith, and that's rightfully so. Jeremiah Smith is the best quarterback. He might be a really good quarterback. Who knows? The best wide receiver in the country. He's shown it. National title as a freshman, competed highly last year, made some really good plays. You need to put two guys on him if you want to stop him in the college game. Also, you brought up the next year's quarterback class could be really good. Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Smith are also going to be in it as wide receivers. So if you don't need a high-level quarterback, you have high-level receivers on there. My question, though, is last year we talked about it a bunch of how good Jeremiah Smith is. I think I mentioned it once, maybe. I think Cam Coleman would be right there, if not higher. If imagine you swap their situations, and not trying to take anything away from Jeremiah Smith, but Cam Coleman started his career at Auburn. He's had like 15 quarterbacks. Jeremiah Smith started his career. Dude, it's funny, but it's also true. That's the sad part.
You might be underselling it too. You might have had more.
Jeremiah Smith didn't start his career with Peyton Thorne and Hugh Freeze running the offense. He started his career with Will Howard at quarterback and Chip Kelly and Ryan Day calling his offenses. Jeremiah Smith, not once again, I'm struggling right now because I don't want to take anything away from him. But if you swap those guys, and Jeremiah Smith was on Texas today after transferring out of Auburn, make that play, I think we would have the same conversation backwards. It's like Cam Coleman is an alien in my mind, just like Jeremiah Smith is. Those two guys, I almost feel like Auburn stole something from us as college football fans the last couple of years because they couldn't throw the ball.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw Nick Marsh in there in the Cam Coleman thing of freak athletes, stud receivers. Kind of just we got Auburn and Michigan State owe us as fans something because unfortunately those two guys just got buried in bad offenses and on bad teams. Both of them, Cam Coleman, obviously, as we know, at Texas because of that video, and Nick Marsh now is going to be at Indiana. Thank goodness, because now those two guys hopefully get unlocked. And I'm looking at this list of top wide receivers. I'm going to just throw in, per ESPN on June 11th. One of them is a little bit head scratching, but I'm going to go through the top five real quick. Jeremiah Smith, number one, no problems there. Malachi Toney, number two, no problems there. Cam Coleman, three, no problems there. Charlie Becker's kind of the interesting one at four. Phenomenal talent, will make a play when you need him, but I don't know if he's that game-breaking guy. And then number five is Nick Marsh, who I think is that game-breaking guy. But that top four of Jeremiah Smith, Malachi Toney, Cam Coleman, Nick Marsh, that is like one of the best top four going into a season wide receivers that I think we've seen in college football for quite some time. We've touched on how many good quarterbacks we have. That's just the top four receivers. If you keep going down this list, it's riddled with big names that are very exciting. I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. It's a bad year to be a college football defense. There are some just incredible quarterbacks, incredible wide receivers. They've found homes. They've found good coaches. They've found good offenses. It's going to be such an explosive year for offenses. And that, like I said, Charlie Becker's on the list. That's a guy that in any year he's probably higher up, but just because he's got all these studs, it makes it harder for him. Ryan Wingo, Ryan Williams, Deuce Robinson, DeCorian Moore are also names that we don't have even said yet, just because of how many top guys there are. Do you want to break down this top 10 list? Or maybe you just want to, is there any guys on here that you think are missing or somebody that you think is maybe 7, 8, 9 that you could see as number 1, 2, 3 at the end of the year?
I mean, for me, my first reaction is Ryan Williams had a fast drop off. And it's funny because I'm saying he's still the 10th best receiver in the country according to this random ESPN list. So it's not like he's bad. But last year it was Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith. And we know Jeremiah Smith is better, but was Ryan Williams better for some offenses? Would not. So that was a drop off. Deuce Robinson, honestly, I'm just impressed that he's managed to be in a top 10 list being on such a bad team. I'm very excited to see what he does. KJ Duff, I'm not going to lie. I'm not even ashamed by this. I don't know enough about him to make a comment, but apparently, according to ESPN, he's the sixth best receiver in the country.
Some Rutgers guy wrote that article for sure.
Yeah, you like how on our doc I wrote Rutgers because I'm like I don't know if you just had this list I wouldn't know who he was. DeCorian Moore, I think you could expect DeCorian Moore to be up higher at the end of the year as long as he stays healthy. Evan Stewart, no one's talking about Evan Stewart. He was consistently one of the best receivers in the country. Tore his meniscus last year, missed the whole season, so people forgot about him. But apparently he's back and more explosive than ever. So I do think there was the NFL went through it first of the offensive coach renaissance of like, all right, we only want CEOs or offensive coaches because that's the way to move the game forward. The rules are changing to benefit the offenses over the defenses. Offenses are more fun if you have a good offense compared to like an Iowa system, even if you win 10 games alike. I think that might be coming to college football too. It's just sexier to be the best wide receiver. I don't know. I know Nick Marsh is also an alien. I think there's levels to it. And I think Jeremiah Smith and like, I think the point of like, this storyline being a thing is like Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Smith are just different humans. Like if you went into a lab trying to create the best, most ridiculous looking wide receiver ever, it would be those two. Like 2 years ago, Marvin Harrison was coming out of college, and you can say what you want about his NFL career so far. The NFL, a lot of it matters depending on where you ended up rather than how good you are sometimes. He ended up with Kyler Murray in Arizona and a defensive coach, and he's kind of struggled from there. But when we thought Marvin Harrison was coming out of college, we were like, man, is this the best receiver we've ever seen? But man, Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman are genuinely like just they're like the closest body types like Calvin Johnson in a very long time. Julio Jones.
Yeah. Jeremiah Smith is 6'4", 225. Cam Coleman, 6'3", 210. I know you those two. Nick Marsh is 6'4", 220. Nick Marsh ran a 4.35. Like it's just these guys are just so like we're hitting that
They're
point
built
now.
in a lab.
Yeah, they are. And it's like college corners are usually like 5'11", 180.
Yeah.
That's like that. Like you could be the stickiest corner of all time, but just even trying to like Jeremiah Smith could just box you out. Like you could be on him one-on-one. He's going to box you out and catch the football. The wide receivers this year are just ridiculous. And Malachi Toney, not a big receiver. I don't know the best way to like measure agility, but in terms of just like speed and space and quickness and ability to cut left and right, backwards, forward, like a speed that's just a little bit faster than anybody else in the field. You have guys like him who are incredibly fun. It kind of reminds me of the like D'Anthony Thomas style players. We have a slew of really fun wide receivers. I'm glad that Cam Coleman is going to find a place that is going to throw the football a lot and utilize him well. I'm glad Nick Marsh is going to find a home that's going to throw the football more and utilize him well. It's better for them as individuals. It's better for their teams. And most importantly, it's better for us as fans. Makes for more fun TV to watch. And Godspeed your teams when you play these wide receivers. It's going to be frustrating.
All right, 2 more topics. I'm going to let you choose Notre Dame or Texas.
Let's go Texas. I think Notre Dame is in a safe spot.
You can hate on. You can be the Notre Dame hater now on the show. No, so yeah, I think Texas is honestly everyone's main storyline of the season because as I wrote in our doc, the time is now. If we're just talking plain storylines, Arch Manning 5 years ago was the best recruit. I'm not even hyperbolizing this. The best recruit to come out of high school. Like he was the only recruit. You know how in 24/7 they have him rated like out of 100. Yeah. Like Jeremiah Smith, I think was 99999. I think Arch was the first like 1. Like he was the first 100. Obviously comes in, sits behind Quinn Ewers for a while. Last year we see him in some moments and he does really well. And last year gets his first year to start. Doesn't look really great. Honestly, like things look weird. Things look confused. And I didn't expect that to happen, not because of his talent. Like I expected him to go through growing pains in terms of like some decisions. But what was the problem with Texas last year was like for an offensive head coach as experienced as Steve Sarkisian, it just felt like they were confused for a lot of it. Like they were just making rushed play calls. They didn't know. And well, that's a symptom of the fact that their offensive line wasn't good and they couldn't run the ball. Now they brought in a new running backs coach this year. They brought in 2 new running backs. They brought in a new defensive coordinator this year. The time is now for, they brought in Cam Coleman, we just talked about. They brought in Malik Brown and Hollywood Smothers. If they can run the ball, if that offensive line gives them some push, so Arch doesn't have to be the superhero every play, I honestly expect them to be. They have to be in the playoff, let alone win a game or two. If let alone like they're almost at a point where like if you had Arch Manning for all these years and you didn't make a national title game, is that a disappointment?
It has to be. I think Texas, anything shy of winning at least one playoff game is a disappointment for sure. I would even venture to say like making a semifinal might anything short of that might be a disappointment. And I'm with you. I think the time is now. Sark has an incredible ability to recruit. He can recruit in the portal. He can recruit high school kids. He's good with boosters. He's a good CEO. But at the end of the day, when the ball is spotted and there's 60 minutes to win a football game, he hasn't lived up to the expectation that he sets with his recruiting. And that's okay. Like it's hard to win games in the SEC. I get that. But I think we're 2 years down the line now of Texas having a lot of hype, a lot of money, a lot of big name players, and them just kind of faltering and not having the year you expect. I think this is the year it's got to happen. I think they went all in on the transfer portal, as you mentioned, with the running backs they brought in, with Cam Coleman and other players. They also went they kind of kicked out Parker Livingstone to make this happen. They're kind of like, this was their all in. As you said, they brought in new running backs, new running back coaches. They brought in Will Muskamp for the defensive side of the ball from Georgia. They've done all the things that make you think, yeah, this team is all in. It's probably Arch's last season. This needs to happen. And it's scary. Like they're the second best betting odds to win the conference championship or the national championship. They're the second best odds to win their conference championship as well. There's still question marks that I think nobody wants to talk about with Texas. And for me, you still have Kyle Flood as the offensive coordinator. He called a pretty bad offense last season. Has he learned his lesson? They didn't have the O-line or the running backs or the scheme to run the ball effectively last year. Did you upgrade running back talent enough? Did you upgrade your O-line talent enough? And did you upgrade your scheme enough to make that happen? We'll have to see. And like you said, Arch Manning, yes, he's so vaunted. He has a really high ceiling, no doubt about it. We saw his floor. And his floor is bad mechanics, rushed footwork, gets nervous, makes bad plays, and he can be errant with the football when he throws. If you're playing the SEC, that you're going to play good defenses, you're going to play games where he's going to get rushed. Can you flush out those issues and those flaws with him? There's still some question marks. I'm not saying they'll be bad, but I'm not ready to just lock them in as lock for semifinals. We'll see you then. I still think they need to prove themselves a little bit before I feel good about them.
My problem with the Arch's season last year is I feel like I didn't get anything. Like I feel like their offensive scheme was so messed up that it just wasn't fair to judge Arch. It wasn't like they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't advance anything. And we mentioned it ad nauseum at this point, all the guys that they brought in from the portal. They shouldn't have to do that. With a coach's experience as Sark, with the resources that Texas has, they shouldn't have to do that to make Arch work. Like, you know what I mean? But yeah, clearly there were some adjustments that had to happen. And I don't know. The time is now. It means the time is now. You can't go into Arch's yes, he has another year, but probable last year of college football and not make a serious run in the college football playoff. That would be unacceptable in my mind if I was a Texas fan.
Yeah, totally agree. They have a lot of studs who are probably playing their final year of college football. You got to capitalize on them. And I mean, they've recruited really well, but still, I think this is a do or die year. Not that Sark's going to get fired, but this is when you want to recruit at the level they do, this is kind of the year to say, hey, look, when I get the right guys, look what we can do. But if you have the right guys now, and if it doesn't work out, it becomes a little bit harder to.
Last take, when we were talking about the Big Ten being national title winners or not this year, the one take I didn't get off was if you look around the country, one of the reasons you could probably bet on that is the Big Ten probably has the least angst of their best teams. Oregon, yes, you're going into this year. This is the best team you've ever had. You've never won a national title before. your fans are pining for. Your biggest donor's 87. Like, you have to go try to, like, not obviously they're going to try. You have to go win the national title. So they have that stress and pressure. Indiana just won one. They're playing with house money. Ohio State just won one, and you know they're going to be back next year. They're playing with house money. Even if Oregon's going to be back next year, they're not going to have this team next year. But you look at around the SEC, Georgia's Georgia. I think Kirby Smart's just steady Eddie. They don't have any angst on them. Alabama is 1-10-2 year, which is crazy to say, away from saying like the fans revolting against Kalen DeBoer. Genuinely. LSU, they have to go do crazy things this year because of all the investment they put into Lane Kiffin. Texas, it's Arch Manning's senior year. You got to go do it. Like, I guess, you know what I mean? It's like, it feels like every team that's in the SEC that's trying to compete for the national title, they have some like is now or never mentality. And that's just the outside putting pressure on it, sure. But for the Big Ten, other than Oregon, not really. Like, yeah, they're playing with house money, and when you're playing with house money, that team is scarier than anyone else.
Yeah, the pressure to perform when you don't have that in the back of your head that we need to perform now, it just makes life easier. It helps you focus, helps clear your mind, that sort of thing. And like Arch, I'm sure he knows it. Like, as we talked about, he's the highest rated recruit ever. He's got the last name. Like, to his credit, like, he's got more pressure than almost any college quarterback has faced in a single season coming into this year than he's got now. He's got no more excuses in terms of the investment, the wide receivers, the O-line. They think they've solved the running game. They're like one of the favorites to win the title. Like, he's good, and he's also wanted to be number 1, number 2 overall pick. Like, he has more pressure than any quarterback we've seen, maybe ever, to win the championship this season. And that's, unfortunate. Like, he didn't do anything to earn. That's not like he's talking the game to make that happen. It's just the pressure going on around him. Well, they're on this episode because they're a fun storyline to follow. And that's my point is they're going to be a really fun team to follow.
All right. Hour and a half into this, I think we got to call it there. Happy birthday, Coach Prime. 59 today. Great. Awesome. I really hope you hire a new strength coach, because if you look at the weights and sizes of the Colorado team this year, you're a little concerned. But happy birthday nonetheless. And right as we're signing off, a tweet from Josh Pate today. The college football, we don't have to break it down because this would be another hour. The College Football Management Committee meets tomorrow to discuss potential playoff expansion. Penn State investigates, that's his thing, is hearing rumblings of a 20-team college football playoff format with play-in games featuring each P4 conference, replaces the value of lost conference title game revenue, basically getting rid of the conference title game in the number 1 or number 2 teams in each conference makes the playoff. And then there's a play-in game for each conference, like you're 3 and 4 or something, and they would be playing in for a third spot from your conference in there. All the talk publicly has been 16 or 24, but this has been privately cooking for a while. You can feel however you want about Greg Sankey, but he's currently the only voice in the room preventing this. I salute him for it. So that's from Josh Pate. We're not going to break it down now, but something to percolate. I promise you, everyone at home, if you had been waiting for our picks today, we will do them next week. Imagine we just keep putting it off. Imagine it's like week 8 and you and I are like, I'm sorry, it's been a busy week. We're gonna give you our 2026 predictions week 9 of the college football season. But no, we'll give you our picks, we'll give you our predictions, we'll try to break down everything. If there's anything you specifically want to get a prediction from us, feel free to let us know. You have our numbers, you have our Twitters, F4 Discussion on Twitter, TikTok at Flag, the number 4 Discussion. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, at Flag for Discussion spelled out. We're on YouTube, subscribe there, Flag for Discussion spelled out. But yeah, conference winners, Heisman winners, national champion, playoff potentially, G5 teams in the playoff. We'll try to break everything down. We'll try to even give some best bets entering the season. We'll be perusing, doing a lot of research, and hopefully getting some outside work in too this week as we're coming up with it. But Jace, you got anything else?
No, it was a great show. I'm glad that we're entering the season. 2 more podcasts until college football starts.
Yes, sir. We've mapped out when we're going to be back on the 2 podcasts a week. We'll let you know in a few. We're going to hold you in suspense for that. Thank you so much for listening. From myself, Farbod and Jace, lovely partner Jace Hatfield, this has been Flag for Discussion.